episode 3 of Stringing Along. I'm Jim Donio.
And I'm Ronnie King.
And tonight, this show, this week, this special program tonight is the Winningest Captain. And we're delighted to have that captain as our very, very, very special first guest. He's our first guest for Stringing Along. So please welcome Bill Bowen Jr., the former captain of the Fralinger String Band. Bill, thanks for joining us. We're so happy to have you.
Very glad to be here, or I'm very glad to be on my couch. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. This is, I think this is going to be a great show. We're really excited to have you be part of it, to talk about your life in the string bands. You know, there used to be, we in our age range, the three of us, there used to be an old TV show. It was called This Is Your Life.
Whoa.
What?
What do you mean? What do you mean our age?
Our age range.
You're right there, Ron.
A decade. If we are,
you're right there, buddy.
If we're within a decade, it's an age range. Okay. So there used to be a TV show called This Is Your Life. So tonight we're kind of doing This Is Your String Band Life. Mm-hmm. So let's get started. So Bill, the captain is not just the leader of the band on New Year's Day. He's the face, or she is the face of the band the other 364 days. And you were in front of Fralinger for 27 years. You won first prize as captain 10 of those years, which is amazing. The most of any other string band captain in history so far. We have to say so far, of course. So tonight's a chance for our viewers to get to know a bit more about, the man behind the costume, the man behind the dancing and the showmanship. And Ron's going to talk with you about that. Ron?
Yeah, not are you just you're not only just the leader of the band in the captain sense when you're at your club and you're speaking to your organization, within the confines of the theme and competition, you are the central character, of course you know that holds everything together. And we're going to go down that road a little bit longer when we get to those subject matters. But for now, we want to go all the way back beyond that. And, everybody's got a story of how they came into string bands. And of course, most everybody who knows me, it's through my family, through my father and my brothers. Mm-hmm. So why don't you take a moment or two to tell us how you got started? Where did this come from for you?
Well, I wanted to be in string bands, took up the saxophone, and I guess it was back in 1965, joined Fralinger. I was 11 years old and enjoyed it immensely. And after I joined, my brother joined 2 years after that. My father joined right about the same time I did, and my brother did. But when I did join, my grandfather came back into the band, into Fralinger. He was a banjo player in Fralinger for years, back in the 40s, 50s. And he wanted to march with me. So he marched with, we marched together in 66 and also 67. And it was great because we got 11th prize the one year and then first the next, and it was very nice to march with my grandfather, and then after that my brother for so many years. He marched up until 1987.
So that's fantastic. So this again is another family affair, which is what we intend to really go all in on with doing this program. It's not just about the costumes. It's not about the instrumentation. It's not even about the themes and the shows that we put on. And a lot of times for many, it's not about the prizes. This is all about family and keeping this tradition alive the best that we can with
Absolutely.
All that's going on.
Yeah,
with that
with all your brothers and your dad and everything else, we call it a hobby, and we call it a hobby nonchalantly, but it's really more than a hobby. It's a way of life. It takes up your whole. It's your whole social being. It's the friends you hang out with, who you go out to dinner with, who you go down on vacations with, and everything else. It's a very big thing, and family's the main part of it. That's, I think, to still hang around there and see them guys and catch up and everything. It's good. Very, absolutely.
Yeah, you still quick walk to the club, are you?
Yeah, unless I'm down the shore, I'm a quick walk right around the corner. Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Well, listen, there's a memory that I have of you from your first year, and that is, back when I was young anyway, when I looked at all the captains, I grew up in South Philadelphia String Band. Joey and my father started taking me around there when I was around 8 years old. So my frame of reference for captains was Dunnigy.
Oh,
And
sure.
of course, I knew that my father was a captain of Garden State back in the day, but that was before my time.
Mhm.
So I started looking at the other captains, and when you saw Ronnie Moyer and Bobby Shannon and Jimmy Dryden, we didn't think that they were musicians. It just because we only saw them in the captain role.
Mhm.
Well, when you came onto the scene, and I'm going to butter you up a little bit here, if you don't mind. I said Bill
I never
Bowen
mind.
came on to Bill Bowen came onto the scene like a thoroughbred racing horse. You were a champion right out of the gate. You were a champion, and you could tell right then and there that was going to hold true for as long as you were going to be captain of Fralinger String Band.
Thank
But
you.
with that being said, going back just a moment, one of my first memories of you was not so much as you being captain, but at the show of shows when you won that year, Fralinger had one hell of a jam session in that back area. And I saw you playing piano keyboard. And I'm like, oh, Bill's a musician, and you're a serious musician. So first of all, how many instruments do you play and what do you play?
Well, mostly woodwinds, of course. Saxophone and some clarinet and some flute, and then basically self-taught on the keyboard, piano, and all that, and
Really?
a couple other things along the way. Left-handed. In fact, I learned banjo through my grandfather. He was right-handed. I was left-handed, but I play an upside-down guitar-style left-handed banjo. Next time we're together,
Wow.
I've got all the chords and everything, even the demolished chords.
Wait. Left-handed and upside down?
Well, left-handed, which is the strings are upside down, of course, when
Yeah.
you switch it
Yeah.
over. But I can play like a right-handed banjo, like left-handed, with all the chord fingerings and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
a
I
little
wish.
odd. It's a little odd.
Well,
Played many
that's
many
it.
many at bus rides with Warren Rebel on saxophone and me on banjo. Those 6-hour drives, we played every song imaginable, of course.
Yeah. They're the best times, right? I mean,
Yep,
you can't. Nothing can beat being on the bus with your friends, just hanging out,
absolutely.
having a jam session on your way to a parade, on your way home from a parade. I
Right.
mean, that's good stuff. That's really great
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yep, without a
Well,
doubt.
I'm going to have some more questions for you later on in the show.
Mhm.
But for right now, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim. Jim?
Yes, thanks. When you were talking about your first years, the 66 and 67 with your grandfather, I just, I don't remember exactly how old, like 8 or 9 years old, but I remember the back-to-back wins. I remember the back-to-back wins for the Magic of Toyland and the Bells of St. Mary. That
Yes,
was 67 and 68. So
68, right.
so within your first couple of years, you had, as a member, as a kid, you
Right.
had back-to-back first prizes. So that certainly, almost 20 years prior, the groundwork was being laid for, for the magic that was, that was to come with you in front of the band.
Back then, when you're 11 years old, 12 years old, 11th prize, first prize, it didn't matter. You were in the parade, and
You
you
were
got
just in the
you had a
parade.
costume on, and you had a lot of fun. That
Yeah.
was the main
Yeah.
thing.
So with that segue, now let's begin to take a look at the performances. And we're going to start with Bill's first year as captain in 1983. It's the first prize winning performance for both Bill and the band, a clean sweep, 1983, Fralinger's Ragtime Band. Let's take a look. So, we talk about, as we were mentioning, we talk about these moments of impact, how they affect the competition, how they affect the judging. And so I've got to ask you about, how did the idea materialize and come about? It's your first year. How did it come about, the idea of you dancing on this larger than life keyboard across the whole street? And there's no chance, right, that you were actually tapping the actual notes, were there, of the song?
I used to tell everybody that, but I can't lie to you. No, I was just trying to stay upright, to be honest with you.
So
No,
how did
no.
that come
But,
about?
well, with becoming captain after '82, and the reason I think I did run in '82, Warren River, who was my best friend, and myself, we were put in the back line in the halftime theme. And because we always played saxophone alongside each other, him on alto, myself on tenor. And I said, this is for the birds. I'm running for captain. And so, so I did. And we had a nice little election in the club, and myself and Vince Lanzalotti, that's who ran. And it was great because we both got up, and Vince said, if you win, Bill, I'm going to still play the bass horn. And I said, and Vince, if you win, I'll take over the bass horn. I'll start playing the bass horn. And that's how friendly it was. And we shook hands, and it was great. And things went on from there. And to work with Herbie and Mike right from the beginning, I was on the SU committee for a long while prior to '83. But in working with those two guys, I mean, those guys were magic, back in the day. They put, Herbie basically put that music together, and then Mike would do the routine. And Mike not only did the routine, but for a long period of time, maybe up until about 1987, 1988, he also did all the choreography too. I mean, there wasn't as much as there is today, but there was still choreography to be done. And Mike did all of that, which is, credit to him.
So is it Mike's idea to do
Yes, it was.
the keyboard? Because it's
Yep.
interesting. It's interesting. That was definitely a moment of impact. Your first year as captain, you're young, you've got this big, back piece on, it's beautiful. And, right from the get-go, and then the band just powers right in. Definitely had an impact. I mean, I remember it. I mean, I was a competitor at that time. I had been in Hegeman for 10 years by that point. But here's an interesting little factoid. So 5 years after that, do you think that perhaps Tom Hanks borrowed that idea?
Of course.
For the movie Big? Because that's,
Not a doubt.
it's not a coincidence. It can't be a coincidence.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Obviously you did it, at City Hall, and he did it in the middle of FAO Schwartz toy store. But, it's obviously, it's interesting to me because I know what the impact was of you doing that, and then that whole performance. And if you think about that movie, what is the moment of impact that most people who love that movie remember? That's what they remember. They remember the larger than life keyboard.
And back then, there wasn't the choreography that the captains do nowadays. It was basically put a nice suit on, put a nice back piece together or whatever, and go out there. And the competition was terrific back in the '80s. I mean, you had Bobby Shannon, of course, Bobby Shannon and Bill Speziel, but there was a lot of other guys in the '80s like John Pignotti and Ray Danielewicz, Bob Dix, Jimmy Donaghy, of course, Big Jackie He. There was a lot of good captains back then, and that ran through the '80s.
That's for sure. Now you made mention of the beauty of the suit and the back piece, and up to a certain point, in the string bands, because of the way that the judging was done, there was a much bigger focus point-wise on the suits, particularly for the captains as well, and making that, some sort of a spectacle. in the earlier days of your 27 years, in this particular first year, you kept the back piece on for, for the entire show. It was, it was magnificent. It was it was the first in what would become for you kind of a trend. If you look at a lot of your years, you were either in silver or gold. There were a lot of silver and gold costumes because it really made you, stand out. And it was also part of the character role that you were playing, which is a great segue for us into the next performance, which is going to be 1986.
This Flickers theme was going to be reserved for another show, but it's one of my all-time favorite themes, and this is a theme, Bill, that I call concept to completion. to me, it's a perfect theme, because you kind of pigeonhole yourself when you say, I'm going to do a Hollywood theme, so it locks you into a specific area where you're going to go with theme selection, or song selection, with costume selection, characterization, choreography, everything about that theme. It seemed like it's a very subjective thing, but it had the perfect song selection for the entire set.
Mhm.
It had you could have picked Indians, you could have picked other characters, you could have picked firemen from those old black and white movies with those characters, but you didn't. You specifically went after Keystone Cops. You specifically went after the cowboy, and of course, you know, the Charlie Chaplin character, you know, goes without saying, right? But
Yes.
you yourself, regardless of how long you were out there, even for this theme, sells it, and it buys it right from the get-go. There's a lot of themes that I like that have started with a win. Now, I know that this wasn't a win, but and this, I'll get beat up for this, but this is what part of the show is about. It's about our opinions sometime, right? So it's just an opinion, guys. If not for the novelty and the great job done by Polish American with that robot ramble, Fralinger wins that parade all day long. And it's because you start out, Mike, I believe it was Mike that came out and spun the wheel on your back, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So Mike comes out, spins that movie wheel, he gets it started, and from there, it just never, ever stops. And the icing on the cake is when you win it all. When that sword comes through that picture and you step out as the Rudolph Valentino or Lawrence of Arabia, whichever character it was that you were trying to portray at that time, that solidifies your role as the captain. Like I said before, it's not just about a leadership thing in your club. It's not about, you know, it's about the character you're portraying in your show. For 27 years, Stacy asked me what I was doing the other day. She said hello, by the way. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing down all of Bill's characters. And I wrote them down out of memory. So if you can blow that up,
Yeah.
I got everyone right.
Wow.
I had to backtrack
You're
a couple
good.
of times, but I got them all right. But this Flickers year here was the only year that you changed costumes. Isn't that right? I mean, like you came.
Well, give you a funny story on that. It was a beautiful costume.
Yeah.
What was made, and it was a Jimmy May product, and it was great. But take back into, and you'll realize that in 1980, what we're talking about, 86 here, this is when the bands were getting a lot of money from TV. I mean, we had a magnificent contract, $25,000 a band. We had great, still got convention hall money. We got prize money. We were living large back in the 80s. It was terrific. And INSA, the captain's costumes, for some reason, they got astronomical in cost. Bill Spezial with John Pignotti. There were some costumes that, you know, whether rumor or not, they paid a lot of money. So I'm at the clubhouse, like right before the holidays, and Jimmy May says, I think I got your suit completely, you know, all set to go and everything. And it's going to be $7,500. And I almost fell off a chair.
Wow.
I said, I'll be right out. And I jumped in the car and went to McDade Boulevard. And what we had a director's suit in the beginning, and then it was supposed to turn into this Rudolph Valentino robe and hat and everything. I said, get rid of this, get rid of that, get rid of the other thing. Just give me one of them hats and make this thing for $2,500. So if I did nothing else right that year, I reduced the price tag to about $5,000, because I don't think any costume at this point is worth that kind of money. And now you're looking at the 80s. So yeah, it was a lot of money back then. It really was.
So the costume that we saw
Yes.
That was the pared down version
That
because
that was the pared down version. There was
it was spectacular.
absolutely, it was beautiful. And all I really did was change a hat. I changed one
Mhm,
hat, but it looked. It's all it needed to be done.
mhm.
It really did.
See the
That
thing
that's
about
really interesting. That all you needed to do was change a hat
Yeah.
to change the entire look. Because
Yeah.
now I'm going to have to go back and watch it again.
Yeah. Nothing else changed on that costume, and I was
Wow.
never a big guy change as far as changing costumes. I didn't really like that. I
It was never fun.
no, no, no. You know, and it's just never fun to go back there and start ripping things off and putting things
Mhm.
on. It was just like, let's try to make this as simple as
But you
possible.
Yeah.
didn't have to. And part of the reason that you won, I mean, there's definitely a comparison. We're going to talk a little bit now about acting a part, acting a role. You know, there have been a lot of actors and actresses who have won Oscars for, and we're talking about flickers, so
Hmm.
I'm making a movie reference. There are a lot of actors and actresses who have won Oscars for moments or performances in, you know, a 2 or 2.5 hour movie where they were only on screen for 6 minutes, 8 minutes. And sometimes they say, oh, I feel, you know, is it right? There's people who were in the movies for longer periods of time. But it relates back to what we talk about on the show, which is, do you make an impact? Now, if an actor or an actress makes a tremendous impact with their performance in a short period of time, it is what it is. And I think you made a joke about it, but you do that in flickers, setting off the show at the beginning as the director, and then as the director your films unfold, and then you come back as almost a character in your own film. But one of the other things I think through the years, and I don't know whether if it was collaborative, if it was um, you know, things that you did or that were suggested for you to do in acting the roles, and then the gestures that you made. So when you do this gesture with your hand at the end as the Sheik of Arabi, it's something that people, you know, it's something that people remember for sure,
Well, I
for
guess I
absolutely.
had to do something. I was out there for such a short period of time. I think Mike was mad at me that year. I really do. He wouldn't let me come out and dance or do anything. But it was nice to be out there in the beginning and then just appear at the end. And I had a lot of time in between to just watch the show.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was good.
definitely. Um, so Ronnie and I asked, we picked the two that we wanted to talk about.
Hmm.
And I think before we conclude tonight, we definitely want to ask you and have you just talk about it after we go through these other two, like what your memories are of being, you know, in front of the band, you know, win, lose or draw, you know, how you felt about being out there for 27 years, a long time. So we did ask Bill to pick two, since we do 4 per show. We asked Bill to pick 2 of his favorites to talk about. So the next one that he chose for us to show tonight is from 2005, which was about midway through. We haven't really talked about the string, the 8-wind string, the unprecedented and probably likely never equaled. We're guessing, but probably never equaled at this point, of 8 consecutive first place finishes. This one was midway through those 8. It's 2005, and it's Gypsy Fortunes. Take a look.
And Bill Bowen Jr. Here we go.
Here we go. Good luck.
So, this particular, period of time, these 8 wins. So we're kind of midway through. Before the string began, Fralinger hadn't won in 16 years, which is a long time.
Long time.
Going from Copa Banana to Starship Fralinger. So what was that like, and what is it about this particular gypsy theme and the others that were part of that string? What were those years like? I mean, I'm sure everyone wants to know.
I picked, I guess, the 2 themes that I picked in the string. I just wanted to, you guys picked early on, and it was just, now it's completely different. Now you've got choreography. You've got a whole lot of things happening. You've got props happening, props on wheels and everything else. So I think it's a completely different parade. And again, now there's a lot of new captains out there. You've got like Mikey Vaughn was around, and Phil Rotundo, Chris Martucci, Mark Danielewicz. There's a lot of new guys, new players in this thing, and now I'm the old man. Now I was the young guy. Now I'm the old guy in his 50s, and I got to get my stuff together here, and it was fun. It was a whole lot of fun to do. We had a great choreographer, Dana Thiel from Penn Sports School of Dance. She took over in, I believe it was 2001. It was 2001, and it gave freed Mike's time up a little bit more so he could work more with the band. We had more things going on. I kind of took the position of not building props, because I was never very good at that, but we had great prop builders in the band, but kind of just pushing it all together, and whatever Mike needed for the show, we'd try to, put together. And we had a change of music directors back then too. Herb stepped down, he retired, and John Winegger came in to write the music starting in 2002. So there was a lot of turnover in the band, but all good, but all for the good. And all those 16 years that we did not win, of course, everybody always wants to win, but the band still stayed strong, and I think it got stronger, and we never let down. We just kept on going. One of the nicest things in 2003, Big Bobby Quayle came down to the clubhouse the next day, and we sat and we had a beer together, and he said, "I want to congratulate you." I said, "Thanks, Bob. Thanks a lot." He said, "Not on the win." He said, "Just keeping this whole thing going for the 16 years that you didn't win." And that meant a lot. It really did, because I know what he was talking about, because you could let down and you could say, and forget about it. We're not going to try anymore, and we're going to lay down and just go have fun. But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to try to, turn the span around and start winning again, which is big.
So
yeah, and in saying that, Bill, when you're talking about how we have transitioned to where we are now. I mean, everything is so much more intense. The music is more intense than it's ever been. Couple that with the show itself. Some of these guys are acrobats. I mean, I'm going to give a shout out right here to one of my favorite performers is Sean Decky. Like, this guy is insane. Like, he is a competitor full on, as is the entire.
I'll agree with you there. He's insane.
As is the entire Fralinger band. Going for that long in a dry spell could cause frustration that could break a band apart. So that's a testament to you, Mike, and Herbie, along with your administrative leadership, to be able to hold that all together. There are plenty of other bands that have never been that fortunate to say, you know what, we're going to keep on forging forward. And look, I'm sure under your leadership and under suggestions made by you guys, there was a time when even the line of march became a question, to where we say, okay, well, we need to step away from these bigger productions and punt, but still be competitive. Like, you never gave up the competitive edge. Some people would say, oh, well, they gave up. That's not a Fralinger band that gives up. It just doesn't happen that way.
And we did that, Rob. We did that back in the late 90s, like not from 97 to maybe 2000. We really didn't have a whole lot of cash, because we bought the property next to ours. We broke it through.
Right.
We redid the clubhouse, and you had to be smart. You had to keep yourself on somewhat of a budget, or you'd have nothing the next year. So we did. We went out cheaping from 97 to 2000. We really did. But after that, we did have a little bit more money to spend, and for costumes and for props and everything else. So you've got to play this smart along the way. Definitely.
Let's show the final performance, and then I think we want to talk about that 8 in a row impact. What was that? What was that like? Inwardly and outwardly, it definitely had an impact on the parade. Definitely had an impact on the string band division. And over an 8-year period, there's turnover in the people who are in the band. There's a consistency of just continuing to keep that up. No one thinks they're going to win 8 times in a row,
No.
but it happened. But before we get to that, so the final one that Bill chose is actually his next to last year as captain. In terms of something interesting about this particular one, it has to unquestionably be the longest string band title in the history, 10 words. So
Sure.
I don't know, we'll have to ask Bill about that, but it's grab your partner, swing them round, Fralinger is westward bound. Let's take a look. So wow, how about those? I've got to ask about the horses. So who came up with how was that construct? I mean, this is Broadway. This is Broadway level props and Broadway level professional production level. Like
and they were
how were they made? They were
they
amazing.
were they were so simply made. I mean, our marshals constructed the bases of them, and we had Kathy Hopkins, who's a very fine foam. She does all foam work. She did the heads and she did the front legs, and there was no rest. The rest of the horse was not there. There was nothing there. All you saw was the front. In fact, there were people that looked at them afterwards because they wanted to buy them a brigade, and they said, "Well, we want to come down and look at them." They looked at them. And they said, "Well, this is it," and that's all it is. It's the head, the neck, and the legs. But the way that they looked after the fellow, whoever was on it, it looked like it was the whole horse. That's what it came down to.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of good props. And let me just throw a shout out to the prop builders that I work with, and guys like Buddy Ray and Mikey Subich and Danny Dunn and Mikey Madursky and Joe Bryce, and I could give you a list of 30 guys, and they're all, you know, they're my age or older, but they work so well. And even taking the end of that thing, we thought the finale was going to be the bar scene, and we got talking about it like maybe a week before Christmas, and said to Mike, and Mike probably said this to me. He said, "Man, we could add a stagecoach or whatever." I said, "Yeah, we could do that." I said, "That would be terrific to bring a stagecoach in." I went to those guys between Christmas and New Year's and said, felt with a picture of a stagecoach, no sketch, no schematic, no blueprint drawings, and said, "Make this, yeah, give us 2 days, we'll have it done," you know. And that's how good they were. And then it would be painted up, and that thing is a finale prop. I think that basically sold the whole show. And that there are little things like that are done, you know, in between Christmas and New Year's, where everybody should be home. But as mummers, we know we're not going to be home. We're going to be out at the garage, and we're going to be rehearsing and everything. Those guys were fantastic back in the day. The credit to them building all those props from the start of the wheels in 2004 until I finished working with them in 2009. They were a heck of a crew down there. They really were.
So let's dig a little deeper into this 8 in a row. I mean, it was unprecedented, and as I said, I mean, the likelihood that it's going to happen again is probably slim. So what was that like? No one thinks from year to year that they're going to win 8 times in a row. How did the band deal with that? Because there's pressure to it as well. And so tell us about the internal machinations of each of these years. You're winning. What did it feel like?
Well, you go back and say you go back first to when Furco won in the late 90s, and they won, I think, 3 out of 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Quaker comes along and they win 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then you almost feel like, man, what do you have to do to get a win? And we got a win in 2003. And then it just progressed, and that's when the wheels came along, and I think we just went on a run, and we just the confidence was there. The band was young, like all the sax players, as you said before, Ron. You know, you had guys like Sean Decky and a bunch of guys that could jump around and do anything, and they're playing 1,000,001 notes with the writing that's John's doing now. We've got tremendous prop builders, and so we're just trying to put little packages together and just be there to help out, and the thing just took off. Not by my leadership. There's 120 pieces in that thing, you know, and to be successful, it just doesn't happen with 1 or 2 guys or 3 guys. It happens with a full band, and that's exactly what happened there. And it just kept growing and growing, and we felt like, boy, we're never going to lose this parade. And as good as it felt for the guys, it was the worst thing in the world that ever happened to the association, in my personal feeling, because how do you get your band up if you're not the band winning? How do you keep, like, when it gets 6 in a row and 7 in a row? What do you tell your guys on New Year's morning to get them pumped up? And they're looking, saying, I don't know if we got a shot to win this thing. Like, what's happening here? And you know, in retrospect, I just don't think it was the best thing that ever happened to the String Band Association. I think a lot of bands may have plummeted from that. A lot of bands still stayed as strong. You know, the Quaker Cities and the South Phillies, they wanted to win, so they kept on beating down the door too. But I don't know, some of the other clubs, I don't think it was that good for them.
And
As a competitor at that same time period, I could tell you that it did feel really demoralizing. After the first couple, you're like, okay, well, they're back and they're doing their thing, and Frailinger's a perennial champion. It took them a long time to get back there, but this is where they should be. They should be in the hunt for this first prize. But but we're watching that calendar click over from year to year, and I'll tell you what, and I'm sure you felt the same way a little bit, like when you're down the street on 2nd Street, when we're done the parade and we come back, and you can hear off in the distance the other band celebrating, and you know what happened.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that really, like, it feels like somebody reaches inside your chest, pulls your heart out, and says, "Better luck next year."
I mean, besides working so hard all year long, it's a long day, and 2nd Street is a long trek from Washington Avenue down to Wolf or Ridner. And when you know you didn't win, it makes it that much longer. It really is a tough day.
And Quaker was number 2 for the 8 years, right?
Yes.
Wasn't Quaker second for the 8 years?
Can you rephrase that a little bit? Did you really? Can you say the second prize band? Not
Quaker
number 2?
Quaker was the very, very close runner-up.
That's good. That's good.
In all 8 of those years, and as you said, they had experienced winning 4 in a row.
Yeah.
So they knew what it was like to string together a series of wins. And then, during that time period, during those 8 consecutive wins, certainly there's a lot of, conversation among the other bands as well, looking at, the choices that Fralinger made. Fralinger repeated some of its former prize-winning concepts, not the exact theme. Viva Latina wasn't Copa Banana, but there were similarities. And Swing Your Partner had some similarities to the OK Corral. So, and I think we've seen that happen again with other bands as well, where you go back, now you're using, 2000s tools to recreate something that you didn't have those tools in the 80s or the 90s.
Right. Yeah. Right. We went with very simple themes, to say the least. That it was the same. I think the only thing we didn't do was class. I mean, it was cowboys and Indians and all the simple themes that, the bands do every year out of the box, but we just tried to put a different spin on it, as we always talk about. But I think that when we got to the 5 to try to go for 5, because we knew that was a record, it got to the point where I think the band was getting beat up physically and mentally, because now you're trying to beat yourselves every year and you're trying to come up, and it's hard to do. So after the 5th one, you almost felt like a relief, like, all right, we accomplished, what we set out to do. And now we're 5 in a row, and no one ever did 5 in a row. And, we could take a little bit of a break, but nobody wanted to take a break. And it was just kept on building. And
that's
building.
An interesting.
And I felt like I said this to a couple people. I thought I was going to be done after 5 in a row, because I felt it was the time. I gave it a really good run, and it was a lot of fun. But when you stand and this run, when you stand down on Marconi Plaza and you look at City Hall, every year you get older, it gets further away. And when you get to the point where you almost can't see City Hall, it's time to stop. And that's how it was getting like.
Yeah. And I want to bring you back to that, Bill, because we're going to transition over to something else. But I want to bring it back to you. I want to bring you back to your first year now. The Fralinger String Band transitioned from your father, and I believe he was captain for 6 or 7 years, about that?
Yeah, 7 years.
Right? Okay, so 7 years. And at a time when captains walked out in front of the band, showed their pretty suit, and then kind of stood off to the side. You come in, your first year is kind of the same like that, but then it starts to transition to where the back piece comes off. Now you're doing a little bit of dancing. Then the back piece, there is no back piece at all. And now you're doing a lot of dancing. Now you're standing up on props. You're coming out of things. You yourself have 27 years of performing at this level and doing these shows. You've never repeated the same character twice. And I know somebody would debate me on that, but I've got a little bit of an alternative discussion to combat that. But I want to know this. How did it feel going from your father being captain to you becoming the captain of the band? Because it almost seems like it's a legacy thing, right? I mean, this is, again, going back to the family thing. You have your dad, then you, and now Brad being captain, and this family legacy continues. But what was your feeling, like your gut feeling, your heart feeling, that like the first day you stepped on that street as captain of Fralinger?
Well, like anybody, I guess the first time you're doing that thing, it's an excitement. It's something that you know, as much as you paraded and went out and played saxophone or danced in front of the band, it's still not the same feeling, because you feel like there's a lot of eyes on you, and you want to do things right, and you want to make it right. So thank God back then, as you said, all you really had to do was strap on a pretty back piece and costume and not do a whole lot of dancing. But I always looked at it like try to just put as much energy in it as possible. And I think that showed, and I think a lot of captains, you know, along the way did the same thing. They take guys like Jamie Caldwell and Scott Moyer and Mikey Vaughan. Those guys they were exciting to watch. They'd come out of the box, and boy, they'd be dancing all around the place. And that's kind of how you wanted to do things. Even Bob back in the day, you know, and Bill Spezial. I mean, he had a little bit more different movement, Bill did, and all that, but everybody had kind of their own thing. I think my thing was, and I tried to portray that at the time, to bring as much energy to the captain's role as possible.
What would you consider your favorite performance? Your personal performance. What would you consider your favorite personal performance?
I do believe that it was probably early on. It was probably the Copa Banana year, because there was a lot of dancing involved in that, and we got that. Yeah. And the music itself, it was a whole lot of fun. And then in the later years, it was the Gypsy thing that I picked tonight. I enjoyed that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Both of those teams are excellent selections. So what do you think? Do you have a thing that listen, having been a captain for only 5 years, I didn't fancy myself. I thought I was going to enjoy it, and I did. I was very proud to be a captain. It was a great honor. But when I looked at my performances, I was like, okay, I don't think that I'm really cut out for this. I want to go back and play music. And but what would you consider a performance that you didn't like of yourself?
Uh, Probably 1990 Wired for Sound.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was something that I wasn't too proud of at all. And there might have been another one or two along the way that I thought I could have did a little bit more with. But at the time, I always felt like, and Mike and we always talked about this. It was just like, hey, I need 15 seconds to fill here. Work on something to do, and it was good doing it. We didn't basically build a show around the captain. We never did that. It was
Right.
basically, oh, we're going to do an Indian theme. All right, well, of course you're going to be Indian chief, and there'll be a couple things you can do. And then later on with the prop thing, which was great because you had a pirate ship and you get up top and ride it, and the stage coach, you can ride it. Well, when you're 55 years old, it's nice to ride for a while.
Mhm.
I look forward to that. It was like, oh yeah, I'll stand on there and I'll ride around on it. That's
I
pretty
can
cool.
sit down. What I
Is
want to know, what I want to ask you before we sadly we'll have to wrap up. So what advice did you give Brad? He's your nephew, and he's kind of in 1983. Now here he is, probably maybe a little younger than you were, I think, when you started,
Yes,
right?
yes, he is.
And what advice did you give him? I mean, he's carrying on now. He's the third in the family to carry
Mhm.
on this legacy, as Ron said. What advice did you give
The,
him?
the the first thing I told him the day that we did the Polynesian theme, I got him aside and I said, just be yourself out there and have a good time and let it come from the heart. And if yourself and he's a great guy, he really is, and he works hard for the band, and he'll do well. He really will. He'll do well, definitely.
Terrific. Well, this has just been a real treat, I think, for us, for Ron and I, mum freaks that we both are.
Had a
It
lot of fun too.
this is we're like kids in the candy store creating this show and being able to do this. And what we've talked about is, for all through the years of the coverage of the parade and the special broadcasts that were done early on. There was a pre-show, and then the day of the parade, there were some interviews. And in some of the years, the early years, the halcyon years, there were like post shows, but there's never really been a show like this that we're doing where, there's really time to like dig in and really talk about what's behind everything that people see on that day. And for people to this is really special because this is for people to get to know you, fans and competitors that, have loved your performances, but now they have a chance to really, if they've not met you, they've just competed with you,
Mhm.
they get to know a little bit about your story. And people who love the parade and love string bands, hopefully through this show, are going to get some insights into really what's behind this tradition. We're all sad, there isn't going to be a parade on January 1st, 2021. And that's part of our incentive for
Mhm.
creating this, is
Yes.
to have
Well,
something going on during this mum season. So,
if I may,
mhm,
just take a quick second.
sure.
For it wouldn't have all happened for me if it wasn't for the three other people, my two daughters, Christy and Jamie, and of course my wife of 45 years, Barbara. Because, as you all know, you can't do a hobby, or as we call it, a hobby. You
Hmm.
can't do a hobby if you don't have the support of your family, and
Hmm.
they were a
Yeah.
very, very big part of this whole thing too. So I have to mention that. And it was a great 27 years. And if there's nothing else, the wins are the wins. And I feel very, very happy that I got those wins. But I'd rather see the band win. And I think think you know where I'm coming from. It's the only one that really cares about captain's prizes are the guy that wins them. So it's really, it's just like that little blurb in the history books. What's in the history books is who won the parade. So that's important. So I was glad to be able to enjoy it with the band for as long as I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the main thing. And if I go down as anything, I just want to go down as a competitor, because I was always probably a very fierce competitor, whatever I did. If it was golfing, if it was baseball, if it was mums, I wanted to try to go out there and do the best that I could. And I hope that I did that.
You did.
Well,
And,
you certainly
your
did,
record
without a
speaks
doubt.
for itself. Your record speaks for itself.
Yeah, the body of work and the record. And so you were happy to be there. You were happy to do it. Believe me. There's so many of us that have been influenced by you in every way. And it's been a pleasure to watch you over all these years. There's a reason why when you stepped down that your predecessors kind of strut like you, Bill. So there must be something to it. You know what I mean? You have a certain way about carrying yourself where, Thomas, Scott, and now Brad kind of emulate a little bit, because that's how much you mean to them, that they've grown up around you. They've seen you all these years as their leader and captain. And I'm sure that they take it to heart too, what they were able to accomplish and what they'll be able to accomplish.
That's nice.
On your coattails. They're their own people for sure.
Of course.
But still, it comes from somewhere, like when we talk about being family, what I do, it comes from my brothers and my father.
Absolutely. Sure.
Just like you've provided for us over all these years. And I personally want to thank you for coming in and talking with us. I don't know if Jim is going to do it, but we can both say it. We apologize that this program could go on for days, so
Yes.
we don't kind of have time in this format.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get to that point where we do have more time in our settings, we'd love to have you come back.
Sure.
And share more memories.
Be more than happy to. No, this was a great time to chat tonight. Definitely.
Well, it's the great thing about it is it's the great thing about this new technology that we all live with and live by is this is now preserved. So things on YouTube will live forever. So for your family, for your friends, for your grandchildren, this is something that will always be there. So as Ron said, we're very grateful, and it's very special to us that you were the first of our guests. So
and I want to thank you guys for what you're doing. I mean, for in a time now that we really don't have a whole lot of mum things to do. This is important. This is important that we can turn this on Sunday and see different programs like this, because we're going to need it. This year, who knows what's going to happen in 22 even, It's a scary time right now. It really is. And when the parade does come back, in some form, I hope it does, it's not going to be the same as what we realized last year. It's going to be a scaled down version, because the bands, they're just not going to have the money. They're not going to have the facilities. And I hope most of these bands come back, but really sad to say, I think we may lose a couple bands throughout the thing, which, we don't want to see happen, but, let's hope for the best at this point.
Sure. And, the three of us are fortunate. We were all part of this fabulous folk tradition at moments in time when it was at its zenith, at its peak in terms of
absolutely
of everything. So we have those memories. So as we conclude episode 3 of Stringing Along tonight, again, of course, we want to thank our special guest, Bill Bowen Jr. We want to thank Angelo Lutz and Kitchen Consigliere for being our sponsor. The restaurant is, as you hopefully know by now, in Collingswood, New Jersey. You'll get a great Italian meal. You'll get the best service, and you will get a really fun experience with Angelo and his team. And finally, lastly, we want to remind you again about the first String Band Association Telethon. It's scheduled to take place next Saturday, November 14th at the Mummers Museum in South Philadelphia. You can watch it on Facebook or on YouTube. There's going to be lots of entertainment from the bands themselves, a wide variety of other talented performers, not to mention segments that are going to highlight the colorful history of the Mummers String Band division. These bands, like many small businesses, are facing tough times. They are trying to keep this tradition alive, as Bill was just, making reference to. So enjoy the show. Give what you can, if you can, to help continue this tradition. And with that, Ron and I will say so long. We'll see you next week for episode 4 of Stringing Along. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
And good night.
Thanks, Bill.
All right. Take care.